Innovation Unplugged from the Alabama Community College System's Innovation Center takes you inside Alabama's workforce development. Join us for enlightening conversations with community leaders and industry experts showcasing experiences, addressing key issues, and celebrating successes in the workforce initiatives across the state.
Welcome back, everyone, to Innovation Unplugged, a production of the ACCS Innovation Center. I'm Houston Blackwood. Today I've got my partner in crime, Brandi Merrill. She's our Director of Curriculum Design, and a very special guest, Mark Colson, President of the Alabama Trucking Association. How are you, Mark?
I'm great. I'm glad to be in Tuscaloosa today, hanging out with y'all. This is a great studio, great podcast, so I'm pumped up.
Yeah. Are you an Alabama fan?
So I grew up an Alabama fan. I played football at Huntington College in Montgomery, and so I kind of got all of that out of my system there. And my wife is a Auburn fan and went to Auburn, and her great-grandfather was an All-American on like the 1913 championship team.
Wow.
He's got a star on the street or a square on the street outside of J&M in Auburn. So
Yeah.
I'm neutral. I support the Alabama teams,
Understood.
though she still calls me a closet Alabama fan.
Yeah. So my wife is a big Bama fan, and she's one of those that screams at the TV. And, you know, she doesn't stay mad, but she gets really excited. It's funny. My dad would throw things and be mad for days if Bama lost, so I'm not that way
My
either.
parents are big Bama fans. My brother went here. He played rugby here, but here, meaning University of Alabama. But my dad's pretty chill. My mom gets super anxious. So they put headphones on and listen to Eli Gold. Well, formerly listen to Eli Gold. And listen to the radio, and, you know, it's ahead of the TV. And if something bad happens, she'll turn the TV off. And she also knits during the game as a nervous habit. And if it's a close game, she makes a lot of stuff. So it's in the DNA of the family.
Mark, tell us about the ATA, what it is, what it does, and how you're connected to the community college system.
Absolutely. So the Alabama Trucking Association was created in 1938. And, you can imagine the trucking industry has evolved a lot since then. And our association's evolved with it. But we've been meeting the needs and concerns of the trucking industry and supporting industries ever since then. Today, we represent what I like to call is the heartbeat of the supply chain. And so Alabama is a top 10 trucking state, both as an association but also as an industry. We represent about 131,000 jobs in our state, Alabamians and that's 1 in 13 jobs. And so I always like to say, automotive sector is a great industry in our state, and we employs about 48,000 people, and those are great jobs. We love that the automotive sector's here because we move all the stuff inbound and outbound for the most part. And Alabama communities depend on trucking. 86% of Alabama communities depend 100% on trucking. Wow. And for those that don't, so nationally it's about 78%. So we're the primary mode of freight transportation. And it's a wonderful place. We got about 35,000 trucking companies in the state. A lot of those are very small. And the bread and butter companies and individual owner operators. It's a wonderful industry, very competitive, highly collaborative. And I'm passionate about it. And whether it be the regulatory challenges that we have lots of public policy issues that we work on, and we can talk about some of those. But the relationship with the community college system is deep, and there's 15 plus commercial driver's license programs through the community college system, as y'all know, and there's 9 plus diesel technician programs through the community college system. And now with the advent of the Innovation Center and Skills for Success, those have been expanded and other schools and opportunities have been presented. And those two job sectors are the two biggest ones in our industry, diesel technician and commercial professional drivers. And so we've been able to work individually with colleges, like here in Tuscaloosa, Shelton State has both programs, and across the state. And every community has unique challenges and opportunities. Sure. And as I've built those relationships, and others in our industry have built those relationships, the way I've characterized it is we want to be a good partner. And that might look different at one college versus another, one program versus another. And at the system level, the community college system under Chancellor Baker has been a tremendous supporter of our industry, understanding the importance of it to Alabama's economy. And so we've done some unique things there, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit. But it's a strong partnership, and it's grown tremendously just in the last 5 years when I started in 2019. And we have great ambitions and visions for what that partnership could look like in the future.
Absolutely. And we're just off the heels of a conference between the two, the community college system and ATA, and brought in a whole bunch of speakers, and you may want to touch on that about the partnerships and all of those areas, and bringing those people in to kind of collaborate and best practices, and hearing from different sectors of businesses that serve that industry.
Yeah, that was the second run for that with Gary Weaver, and that's his passion. His dad was a long haul trucker, and I love to hear those stories.
Me too.
But before we get into that, I've always been curious, Mark, how did you get to the ATA? What'd you do before that?
Yeah, so I've always said, and I think we can all resemble this in some aspect of our life, that God has a sense of humor. And I grew up changing truck tires for my family's tire business, Blowout Tire Company in Chilton County. Matter of fact, as I drove up 82 today, I passed the old shop, and which is not there anymore, in the house where my grandparents lived. My grandfather started that business in the 1950s. Some people would know it that traveled to Tuscaloosa, especially for games, as the Army Barn. My great uncle started a Army surplus store there, and then when my grandfather moved from downtown Birmingham, which was Latham Tire, he moved his family, my mom, to Maplesville, and they started Blowout Tire Company. Yeah. And in the 70s, my father.
What a great name.
Yeah.
Blowout Tire.
Blow into blowout is what they would say. And then in the 1970s, my dad, who married my mom, he's from Greene County, Utah, Alabama. They met at Montevallo and married there. He ended up taking over the family business, and so he still runs it to this day. It's now right outside of Clanton on Highway 22. And so I grew up working in that business and learned a lot about hard work, learned a lot about the trucking industry, gained an appreciation for it. Not necessarily how I made my way here, but for 13 years I worked for the Business Council of Alabama in various roles. And so I really, as I would tell friends who really weren't in that world, it was got to live and work at the intersection of where business, government, and politics interact. Okay. And a lot happens at that busy intersection, right? Yeah. And still there in this job, and really got to see the fabric of our economy as I got to work with small businesses across the state, local chambers of commerce almost in every county and every community. And there, the trucking industry was a big part of that. And so I gained a great appreciation. And so in 2019, Frank Philgo, who had run our association extremely successfully for 24 years, retired, and I applied for that job, and was a blessing to get to serve the trucking industry. So lots of interesting stories in the interim there, but it was a really unique opportunity to get to work for the statewide business community and understand the makeup of Alabama's economy. I'm always very interested in how companies make a profit, right? Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to turn a profit in a business. So few people understand how difficult that is, especially, when we deal with those in government, in higher education. And for those to start a business, to employ people, to deal with all of the things that come with that. Right. That was kind of in my DNA from an entrepreneurial family, and getting to work with people who do that every day really instilled in me this appreciation about how important it is to support businesses and the men and women who work in it, because the challenges are daunting. I mean, when you think about it, like today, in today's economy, it's practically impossible to start a trucking company from scratch. I mean, just you think about the cost inputs, you think about the liability risk that you get into. And so if you had $10 million and you're going to say, what am I going to do with it? Your first thought is probably not to start. We've got to change that. I mean, we've got to, and Alabama does a better job than most states. But, starting a business, sustaining a business, growing a business is extremely difficult. And so I'm always interested in understanding how industries and companies in particular got started, how they remain profitable, how they evolve with changing economies, changing technologies, and the trucking industry is no different. And so getting to work with all these companies throughout the state and throughout the country, it's really interesting to see how they build in resiliency. And that's when people ask me how to describe the trucking industry, I'd say it's extremely resilient. It's extremely resilient.
That's a good word. We talked about that with Chris Strickland a long time ago.
He's a rock star, man.
Yeah. I bought his book. Before he came, I was going to read his book and be a good host. My dog ate it. Literally ate it.
My dog ate my homework.
Best excuse.
Well, the only part I got was when he wrote about waking up from the crash. When he stood up and he realized what it. So I told him that, and he he's a kind guy. He sent me the Kindle version, well, online version. So you mentioned turning a profit. Those trucks have to be moving, which means there's got to be a driver in it. And driver shortages, when we started, when I was at Calhoun in 2018, there was a driver shortage. ELDT was on its way, and it got delayed 2 years. How hard is it for these companies to take on new drivers that are experienced, inexperienced, or maybe they've been in a B truck and they're going to move to A? What's that topic like for them, and what are they really looking for?
It's one of our greatest challenges in trucking is onboarding entry-level drivers of any age, and most people don't know this in the trucking industry. The average age of an entry-level driver is 38 years old, both in Alabama and nationally, which is crazy, right? It's not sustainable, and there are reasons for that. I mean, one is, until recently, Alabama was the 49th state to adopt an intrastate, meaning within state lines, 18 to 20-year-old commercial driver's license. So prior to that, you could not get a driver's license if you're 18 to 20 years old. Now you can, and you can drive intrastate. Still very difficult for companies to hire that population if they're able to get it, especially over-the-road trucking companies because they're crossing state lines, but even intrastate companies because of the cost of insurance and the liability risk. There are certain applications where that's extremely beneficial. And it was a challenge because, you try to get into high schools. We've got great opportunities to work with high schools, and we've got some wonderful success stories there of late. We have a team of truck drivers that go and present to high schools, primarily around how to drive safely around a truck, because that's the most important thing, driver's ed classes and others. But like Lloyd Howell, who drives for TCW, he's our driver of the year this year, but he's been on our road team for years. He just got appointed to the America's road team through the American Trucking Association. So they love doing that. But, if they go to a class and a 17-year-old's like, my grandfather was a truck driver. I'm in. What do I do? Well, it's like,
nothing.
We'll see you when you're 21.
Yeah.
And that's not
hard.
sustainable. But there are pathways into the industry of onboarding entry-level drivers. Again, most of them are older adults, but the insurance requirements are challenging. And so partnering with and finding opportunities for those folks, whether it is a Class B driver job. I probably just messed up my microphone here. I talk with my hands, so I'm doing podcast karate over here. To find opportunities to get into that first job, because every truck driver I meet, I ask them, where did you get your training, and then where did you get your first job? And you find that there is a pathway, but I feel like there's still a lot of mystery around the entry pathways into the trucking industry, especially for the professional driver job sector. And I think one of our goals in partnership with the community college system as an association, working with companies in the state, is to do our best to demystify those pathways, map them as clear as we can. We've got challenges that other industries don't have, but talking about them, trying to address them head on, not sweeping them under the rug. And, as you mentioned, the driver shortage, listen, if you go and Google driver shortage, you can find a national debate on certain folks arguing it's 80,000, or some saying there's no driver shortage at all, we just need to pay more people. I think I let the economists deal with the hard numbers. They can get in a room and cook up whatever they need to cook up. I think a premise that anyone can agree to is that we need high-quality people going into high-quality training programs, getting into high-quality jobs with high-quality companies, or going to work for themselves. And, what the numbers are, who knows? But I don't think anyone can argue with that premise.
Sure.
And that has been really the nexus of the relationship with the community college system. We have some high-quality training programs. We want them all to get better. We identify the high-quality people who have a propensity to go in and do that kind of work, because it takes a unique skill set, right? Yeah. To be a truck driver, whether it's short haul, long haul, and all the different sectors for the professional driver. And then, really find ways to connect them with employers who are doing things the right way. And that's who we represent in our association. And we always are working to raise those standards of quality. So long answer to a very complex question.
Sure it is. I know that's not easy.
Oh, absolutely. And in terms of mindset, I mean, that's similar to, I was just sitting here thinking while you were talking that it's so similar in how we look at things too. It's like, how do we problem solve this, and what are the challenges, and what are the barriers, and then how do we still kind of bob and weave around those, to allow those folks to get that experience, to be excited about a role, a job, a career, while at the same time showing them different pathways and that kind of thing. But even in those instances where they may have to wait a minute, but keeping them engaged, keeping them excited, and keeping them on that path and that in between time, I bet is tough. Is stuff that we have talked about before too.
Yeah, and it's tricky. Before we came along, there were 15 driver training programs in the state. Now there are 22.
Okay, see, I had my numbers off.
Well, no, you were right, but like you got places like Coastal, LBW.
Well, through the Skills for Success
Yeah,
program.
It don't have a traditional program,
Right.
But they, Coastal and LBW, neither one have a truck, but they serve almost as many people as, like Bishop or Gadsden or Calhoun, because they do incumbent workers they've been driving, just not on the roads. So they know the stuff. But my question, you mentioned the interstate policy. So you can drive from Mobile to Scottsboro, but you can't drive from Mobile to Biloxi.
Pascagoula, whatever. Yeah.
Do you think that seems a little crazy to me? Like, it seems like there should have been a mileage issue. Why was it intrastate?
You're getting into territorial issues between state government and the federal government. There is a safe driver apprenticeship program through the Department of Transportation that was passed through the IIJA, the infrastructure law that was passed several years ago. And due to some onerous requirements that were put on there by the Department of Labor to enter into a Department of Labor apprenticeship program, it really became convoluted to the point where, well-meaning employers and trucking companies who want to participate in that pilot, basically they were going to take the best companies and the best safe drivers based on their records, put them in a pilot program, study it so that it could be expanded to allow 18 to 20-year-olds who meet rigorous standards to drive interstate. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise that some 18 or 19-year-old was just going to be thrown the keys to a big truck and say, have at it, is just crazy. No company's doing that because of liability risks. And they're not even doing that to 30-year-old entry-level drivers.
No.
That was a fear-mongering. I mean, just to put it plain and simple. But no, I mean that it doesn't make any sense. There should be, but again, that you're now trying to unravel the state versus federal ownership of regulatory policy. So that's a difficult. If we could fix that, we would be in good shape.
We could fix all kinds of things at that point.
Well,
Goodness.
Yeah. So that's always a mystery to me, and I knew that, and that was like that when we got here. I found it that way. But then we have these guys that go through Class B programs, and they've been driving dump trucks for 20 years, and they go through a refresher course, for Class A, or go through a Class A course in general. When the ELDT came out, that's right when we came to be a thing. In between 20 and 22, and when it got pushed off, did you think that we were absolutely crazy when we came along? Like, hey, Mark, what do you think about this?
No, I mean, so ELDT, for those listening that might not know, is entry-level driver training, and that's when you're getting your CDL. You have the written test, essentially, is what it builds for, and there's certain standards that have to be met. Before those existed, they just weren't codified.
Yeah.
And essentially, every driver training program through the community college system and most of the private training programs in Alabama and the ones affiliated with companies already met every standard. It was a floor, it wasn't a ceiling.
Right.
And it really just kind of codified all of the standards that one should meet as they're going through a driver training program. But the federal government, over a 7-year period through FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, promulgated this rule. It was widely vetted. And, there was a lot of misinformation around it when it was rolled out. And so, yes, there is for a person that drove for 20 years that predated that needs to go to Class B to Class A, yes, they have to go back through some basics. For those, they can fly through those basics. So that for them, it probably is a box that's checked. Yeah. But for others, it's just codifying what is a standard of safety, really, is what it's focused on. And so those programs, they had to retool a little bit. But every program we talked to already met those standards. But then as the Skills for Success program came along, which we were one of the first programs that was developed, I think that was one of the huge benefits. By going through that online curriculum that was created through the Innovation Center and then Skills for Success, it met that ELDT requirement. And so it was a deliverable, right? And there are other companies, for-profit companies
Sure.
that do that. But that was a tremendous value add from the community college system level. So I thought it was visionary, and the fact that you all jumped on it so quickly and we could collaborate on it, I think was just a value add for everyone.
Well, it wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for Houston.
Oh, ain't no doubt.
I mean,
There's no
from
doubt.
the beginning, CDL has been his baby, and it is the one of the most, if not the most, popular, of all of our courses, which is one reason why just recently we went back and revamped it and refilmed it and went out and.
Did you know that?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. You
Oh, yeah, that's right.
invited
Yeah,
us to,
yeah.
to some of the shootings. I'm sorry, I was on the road that week.
That's okay. But that was our biggest T-shirt. We talk about been there, got that.
Yeah.
Didn't get the T-shirt.
Yeah.
Not including the colleges in that first course, the first videos. Man, it was brutal. It was brutal. So we went back and put them in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
as good call.
They belonged.
Good call.
Well, they belonged from the
Yeah.
beginning. It just, you start something. It's like starting a business. You live and learn, and you may try something, and boy, that worked. So you keep doing it, and then you try something that didn't work, and then you got to turn around and pivot and make a change. And in hindsight, we that's one of the main ones we wish we had done different. But
all
we
those
righted it now.
Yeah, we sure did.
Yeah.
Brandy's team did a job. The colleges that were the most mad at us about that now have our logo on their trucks, or we gave them money
Yeah.
to buy trucks, which always helps.
They love us now.
But what that is, so when we started, we had Class A, Class B, and then the school bus pathway, Class B passenger school bus, and then hazmat. But what we found is that a lot of people, when they're new, if they've never been around a truck or a transmission, they have a hard time shifting. And in our model, we started at 2 weeks. In Aaliyah, with your guidance, we shifted to 3 weeks, which really, at the end of the day, when you look at the courses, really it's 3 weeks of training, actual in the seat time, and it may stretch to 6. But what we've discovered is that past the Class A, Class B, there are still some deficits, and so we had a couple scenarios that we're considering for the fall, and I was hoping today to run some of those by you. One of those is when somebody goes through and they just get the automatic license. So they have an automatic restriction. What do you think about how will the companies receive a restriction removal course so that the person gets their Class A, then they come back after they've been hired and they're onboarded and they're a good employee. The company sends our letter back to us and says, hey, here's Bob. Bob's a good driver, but Bob needs a manual transmission. And so we have a funding option, a course just for learning how to shift. How many companies would receive that? Well, or is it necessary?
It's a good question. I when you talk to the manufacturer, to the dealerships, I mean, they look at their orders, right? And I mean, the automatic transmissions have taken over.
Sure.
I mean, you almost have to special order for new truck purchases a manual transmission. And there are reasons for that. There are pros and cons to that as you talk to drivers, especially. I mean, older drivers obviously like manual transmissions. There's an argument to be made that manual transmissions keep you focused on the road more, and their operational benefits and costs to both. For the female driver population, automatic transmission has been tremendous. We have 7 to 8% nationally female drivers. Being able to move to automatic transmission and other manufacturing dynamics have improved attracting females to the. If we could get that to 10 or 11%, that would solve a lot of our driver issues.
Sure.
Statistically, female drivers that are truck drivers are safer.
Okay.
One of the big
I've heard
issues
that.
there.
I've heard that about
Does that answer your
cars.
question?
I've
Yeah.
heard that about
Well,
all kinds of vehicles that women
Not
are
your
better
vehicle.
drivers.
Not your vehicle.
Well, and one of the major challenges there, which we can get into later, is truck parking. I mean, that's a huge deterrent to female drivers, is the lack of availability of safe truck parking. But going back to your question, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that when one big challenge for someone who has a limited license, a restricted license, not being able to drive manual transmission is if they break down and they have another truck that's there, they can't, if all that's available is a manual transmission, it doesn't help, right? Because they can't legally drive it. But that's a good question. I mean, that's a good question to ask. I mean, what population of your drivers? I know a lot of companies still only use manual transmissions.
Yeah.
But that is not the trend. I mean, the trend line is moving towards automatic transmissions. So.
Yeah, I spoke to Jessica Perez, works at TruckWorks.
Oh, yeah.
And we were looking at, for our fall conference for the workforce officers, and having some breakout sessions. And she's got an interesting buyback program, but I was asking her, what are people buying? What's available? And she was telling me about some of the diesel exhaust restrictions coming out in 27 and then again in 35. And so the availability and the price of trucks is crazy. And automatics are, a little more expensive because of the demand. What about this? You've got some guy who's had a Class A for years, and he has a few accidents. And the company says, well, we like him. He's a good guy. He's dependable, but he's old and not old, seasoned. And especially in the municipalities, a lot of experienced drivers have been driving air brake trucks forever. What about a refresher course?
Yeah, I think, though, most companies that I'm aware of do that themselves through driver training. And Chris Strickland has a great program just within Dunn Construction about using a simulator to do professional development for their, professional drivers. So I believe that's good. This is me, having never driven a truck professionally or run a trucking company. But most of the best practices of companies now do some form of that already. So I believe there's always a place for that. I mean, any professional that I know that takes their job seriously, which is the vast majority of professional drivers in any other sector, always want to get better. I think, if you talk to a pro athlete, they don't think they've got it, right? They're waking up every day finding a way to get better. And that distinguishes a professional from someone who's just doing a job.
Right.
And that's why, from an industry standpoint, from a professional standpoint, I mean, I think that's something that I've wanted people to look at the trucking industry a little different. Whether it be for economic development purposes, whether it be for workforce development purposes, we're not just the afterthought of an industry. We're a key sector of that supply chain, because without it, nothing moves.
We saw it.
I mean, yeah.
We saw it at COVID.
But as an industry, we have to treat ourselves like that. We have to have high expectations on safety, on professionalism. So, no, I mean, some would say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think we all would agree we all need to be, continually coached. I love, I may have said this before in an interview, but I need to look up this guy's name, but Savannah Bananas, familiar with this?
Exactly.
Yeah, the guy who is out there in the yellow suit and the top hat. I don't know if he's their CEO or their general manager or whatever he is, but he was doing like a TED Talk type interview, and someone asked him several questions, and he had some wonderful leadership lessons. One of them was, how do you attract, talent, and once you do, to identify who's actually going to be a good fit on this quirky baseball team that does the show. But how do you train them once you get there? And his immediate response was, first, I don't like the question, because I don't believe you train humans. You train dogs and animals. Humans want to be nurtured, coached, and educated. And, just that, and it's a term, it's a word of art, it's terminology. We all talk about training. Training's not a bad thing. But I get what he's saying there. It's that whole mindset of being, you need to go get trained, right? Telling a seasoned professional. No, we there's new stuff out there. You need to be educated on it. We all want to be coached and mentored in our own unique ways. And so, I think anything that's going to set a culture of doing that's a good thing. So I like the idea. And again, I think most companies, as a best practices, are already finding ways to do that.
Yeah.
Let me piggyback off of that and say, okay, Mark Colson, you know what we have built, and the courses that we offer. If we offered anything you could think of that is needed, what course should we build next?
I fundamentally, if you want to, for trucking or just in general?
Yeah, in your world.
Both.
I would stick to your world.
So I would, this is self-serving, but also I think every other business person in Alabama and across the country would agree to this: customer service. It's something Chris Strickland at Dunn, I know, was interested in. He reached out to me years ago and said, do you know of a customer service training, coaching course that is designed for, that could be modified? And we reached out. I mean, major corporations have it, of course.
Sure.
You got the Kathy, Kathy program through Chick-fil-A. But a customer service course that could be slightly tailored per industry that, because think about it, trucking. Depending on the type of trucking company you are, maybe your truck driver interacts with your shipper more often than your salesperson. Yep. And, that matters a lot.
Absolutely.
And so just some basic customer service protocols and training, coaching that could be tailored to the unique nature of that individual, business sector. I think would be huge.
I think we're partway there. We are already developing.
This wasn't scripted.
No,
I didn't know you were gonna
close
ask
to
me
the
this.
end. I know. This is how beauty happens, though. This is why we love this
That's
job.
where the magic happens.
Yeah, it is. So, we actually are in the process of building and very close to the end of a customer service course. So, then we love this whole hub and spoke idea, so that we take a concept, a course, the basics of something, the foundation of customer service, and then we have these offshoots, and the next offshoot off this customer service course where the foundation is already built could, absolutely, really be tailored towards the trucking industry. So we couldn't have scripted it any better, actually.
One of the unique challenges the trucking industry has with its population, let's just use, for example, say you're in Birmingham, you have a company, it's a small company, say you have 500 drivers, but if you're in Birmingham, you're an interstate over-the-road carrier, whether it's flatbed or whatever sector you're in of trucking, your drivers aren't just like there. I mean, you got drivers that live all across the country.
Mm-hmm.
You may have terminals in different states. You may have, it's really difficult. You think of like training or like a manufacturing facility. They're on different shifts, but they're all right there.
Yeah.
You have your supplier network. Trucking industry is difficult, and so just from like a safety protocol, you have your, this is extra stuff, but you have your by law things they have to be educated and trained on, and across the board. And getting them in one place is extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. FaceTime is extremely difficult. Ways to communicate electronically is extremely difficult. And so I think one of the beauties in the skills for success is that deliverability, especially in our industry. And we may be unique in that way, but how you interface within the company and provide those trainings or coaching is also something to be thought through. And I know that that was one of the beauties of the Skills for Success program. One of the number one criticisms I heard from individuals who'd been through a static program that had set hours was that most of them are adult education that become a professional driver, and they have a job, they have a family, and it's hard to take 4 to 6 weeks off and just go. And so that is one of the beauties of that. I would say diverse deliverable for whether it be Skills for Success or for any other like customer service.
I would agree. And
training.
I think that's really kind of strikes to the heart of what the customer service course is and how ours is. It's fun to build because then we can take all of those different scenarios, right? And we really kind of embellish the learning content. So kind of taking each scenario of all of those different interactions that a driver may have, any given scenario, you may deal with this person this day and this person this day. And, and then taking those scenarios and teaching them if you said this, or if you responded this way, is this really going to be taken the right way? Or how should you say it a different way? And so those scenario-based interactions and interactives are just, it's not even a thread of the course. It's like the chord of that course. And it's really all scenario based. And so it just makes for a great learning environment.
Pipe dream on that. If you had that theory that they complete in their bunker, at the truck stop or wherever and at home. But then for the lab part, since it's all scenario based, you could have these things at truck stops. You could have a mobile lab come to a truck stop in Jackson, Mississippi, because you got 14 drivers from Alabama companies stuck in Jackson for the night. Or you could even do it like Teams or Zoom or something.
And I would think, and it may, maybe not, but if you're an owner-operator, or you own several trucks, or you have a fleet, I mean, that matters to you too. I mean, you want to, it's a competitive environment out there, right? I mean, what are the distinguishing factors? Obviously, price is one. You have brokers that are going to broker the freight. But ultimately, you want dedicated runs. You want a dedicated relationship. You want existing relationships. And yes, they're going to look at price. They're going to look at your safety record. But then, the probably third or fourth, fifth thing is their experience. And that's true in any business. Restaurant business, probably number one, other than the quality of food, is customer service. But even in transportation, I mean, that it matters. And I think it's going to matter more when the economy picks up. I think you're on to something there.
Me too. And good customer service when you see it, but boy, it when it's bad. I mean, it's just kind of the
and
human nature aspect.
COVID just damaged that, I think. And I say COVID. COVID didn't do it. Our reaction to humans' reaction to COVID did. And it, my line coming out of COVID is every part of our lives. You pay more, you get less.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much.
Product, service.
Whether it's a bag of potato chips or anyway, I was going to go into, we even noticed that, like, operating hours of places.
Yes.
Like that, who in the world would have thought, 10 years ago that you would look on a Friday night and this type of business is closed on a Friday. Like that would have never happened. It's insane what transpired after that.
So what's next for truck drivers in Alabama? Nationally, you've got this EV push. You've got eventually, I think FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier, will say, here are some hours that are required for training. What's going to happen in the next 5 years to truck driver coaching training in Alabama?
Well, you mentioned EVs, it's electronic vehicles, autonomous vehicles. I mean, I'm actually bullish. I think it's really interesting the amount of technology that are already in trucks and what's going to evolve to. The challenges we have in the trucking industry, and it affects the drivers, it affects the companies and it's going to affect the cost of goods for everybody, or certain mandates that are mandating certain technologies, whether it be electronic vehicles. You've seen it in California. You see some out of the EPA. And we start at YES on how to improve the environment. We have a wonderful story to tell in the trucking industry about improving the environment. And trucks today on the road operate 99% more efficiently as far as carbon emissions than trucks produced in the 1980s. They operate just some pre-2010 models. They operate more, almost like 45 to almost 50% more efficiently. So, trucks manufactured today with clean diesel emit only about 2 to 3% emissions. But about 46, 47% of the trucks on the road are pre-2010 models. So rather than forcing technology that's not quite ready yet for an infrastructure that's not quite ready yet, explore all of the above approach, whether it be hydrogen, which powers electric vehicles. Who knows what type of technological innovation that can come out of research and development. But right now, we can improve the environment drastically by getting post-2010 model trucks on the road that are clean diesel. And there's still a 12% excise tax on new truck sales. So that's a huge impediment. That was a World War I era tax that was put on commercial truck sales to fund the war. And it's been there ever since. So on top of all those sales tax, everything else, you pay 12% to the federal government. That
was 100 years ago.
Yeah,
exactly.
Really.
And so that's a huge impediment to small companies who could potentially purchase that equipment. Yet we're sending huge subsidies which is fine. I mean, if you want to incentivize certain research and development, but we shouldn't just pigeonhole it. Yeah. We've got to find the things that are going to be applicable. There's a market for it that's not artificially driven, and we can do that. And so that's one. On the autonomous vehicle front, people think it's scary, but I would say we all have autonomous technologies in our car already. It's phases. I don't think, a full self-driving truck exists, just like cars, but their applicability is going to be in certain applications. And it's probably going to, in my opinion, those type of technologies over time, probably not in the next 5 years, next 10 years for sure, are going to enhance the professional driver position, not degrade it. And so I'm bullish on those things. There are certain challenges that present there. I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about the relationship with the community college system. Brandi, earlier you mentioned the professional development conference that was held back in June. And I want to shout out to Gary Weaver and April Kendrick and the system and all the colleges. This has been a passion project for many of us. Brad Wallace down at Bishop State, so many, Houston, you've been a huge part of it. Every sector of education I had found had professional development support for the educators. I mean, you all know this. Every class you took is only as good as the person standing at the front of the classroom.
Absolutely.
Right?
True.
And same goes for the professional world. I mean, so special ed, high school coaches, elementary ed, every sector had these associations and conferences that support them throughout the year. Yeah. And we had, as Houston says, now 22 CDL programs, 9 plus, 10 plus diesel tech programs, and the program leaders and the instructors that are doing the hard work, boots on the ground, while their colleges, supported them, as a collective, they didn't get the support that they deserve. And it was no one's fault, but it was an opportunity for all of us. And so through Gary and the community college system and our association, we did the first one in 2023. It was a huge success. This year was even better, and we're even going to make it better. I have a meeting tomorrow in my office with some of the leaders, and we're talking about how to make it even better for next year.
Love it.
And I told Gary at the outset, before we even conceived how it was going to come together, I said, I'm selfish. I want one thing out of it for the trucking industry, and we'll help pay for it. But I want one thing out of it, is to be able to look all of those professional trainers and educators in the face and tell them we love them and we support them. Because I learned through COVID, people as essential as truck drivers would tell me, I've been driving for 20 plus years. I've never had somebody just walk up to me and say, thank you for what you do. But then that started happening, right? Hashtag thank a trucker. So it reminded me of something in life I think we should all remember is we oftentimes just forget to do the simplest thing, which is just say thank you and show the love. And so we've done that, and now we've got the foundation set, and we just want to make it better. So we're fully committed to it as an association, as an industry. I know we have sister industries in the state that are very supportive, road builders, forestry, others. And as this thing grows, I'm really excited about where it can go, because it's all about taking it up a notch, right? Professionalism, making the standards better, finding who needs what support, connections and networking with industry and those in the classroom. And it's only going to be better. And I'm not aware of this being done anywhere else in the country. Maybe it is, but I think we're onto something here, and we're a trendsetter. So appreciate the support level from the system, from the individual colleges. And if anybody questions the value of that, give them my cell phone number. I'll help them. I'll help them understand.
Yeah,
love it.
It was a full house, both sessions, glowing reviews for every session.
Yeah, it was
So
great.
it's good. We appreciate your support on that.
Absolutely.
And all
Building
things.
relationships.
Yeah. We tell a lot of our guests, and on this podcast, but just in person too, like there are some things that we would not be doing if it weren't for people.
Absolutely.
So I think that if you and Tim had not supported us in 2021, 2022, we would have not had our CDL course, probably wouldn't have had all the other success too. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
It's an honor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Final thoughts from Mark Colson and the ATA?
Drive safe around trucks. I mean, get on the road. I mean, we have a safe driving law. We don't need a law to tell you not to look at your cell phone. I know it's hard. I mean, we've got to fix that. I mean, as a culture, just be safe on the roads. I mean, we have a lot of construction going on down the state, thankfully. We're a big part of investing in our infrastructure. Alabamians deserve that. It was underserved for so many years. Still not enough, but it's better than it has been. But that comes with risk, right? So
Absolutely.
as you're in a construction zone, those are people risking their lives out there building those roads.
Yeah.
And people risking their lives hauling that freight. Same goes for truck drivers, but just be safe on the road. I mean, drive safe, drive the speed limit, put your phone down. I'm talking to myself too. We all have families. We all want to get home to our families every day. And thanks. And I would just say a shout out to our law enforcement that's out there risking their lives every day. We have a tremendous relationship with the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency and the FMCSA, and it's all about saving lives. That's what it's about. Yeah. And, we want to represent the best in the industry and support them. And having a collaborative relationship with law enforcement is a big part of that.
That's awesome.
Well said.
Absolutely. Couldn't have closed it out any better. All right. Well, thanks to Mark Colson and the ATA for joining us today. And be sure and like, subscribe, and follow on all podcast platforms. Thank you.